Yeah, it's scandalous. Completely and totally shameless scandal. I'll tell you what the truth is. The truth of the matter is this, right? Same with the Broxy Kennels Hill Fort. That Broxy Kennels Hill Fort, right? It's in the way of a bridge project. I think it was Perthshire, actually. I can't remember. Actually, it might have been Aberdeenshire, but I think it's Perth. I think it was Perth, right? To get it correct. And the archaeologists were getting a chance to excavate it because it was being all paid for by the developers, right? And they got to excavate the whole hill fort. But that was because the developers were building this bridge, this big government project. And I worked out that you can do a petition, and if you get over a certain percentage of people, right, you can get a local referendum. You can actually have a local referendum where the people decide, not a corporate body or the government. Now, because Perthshire has got a very small electorate, like a very small number of people, to get a percentage there to trigger a referendum is like 5% of the population. It's very small. It was literally probably less than 5,000 signatures. And when I started pursuing this, mysteriously, I kept getting removed from Facebooks or my posts vanishing or things like that mysteriously happening, right? And I think it was the government. I think it was the Department of Transport. I think it was these government agencies who are taking things down from social media. So they didn't want me to succeed. It was actually a really easy achievement. Now, I managed to get the contact number for one of the principal archaeologists, right, who was working on that project. And I appealed to her, and she was just like, she just didn't care. She was like, her attitude or her opinion, I'm not saying she was rude to me. She wasn't rude, but it was very clear she's got this like Crown Prosecutor attitude. There's a certain executive cult now in government, which is like the Starship Enterprise. It's kind of like, one for all and all for one. It's like, Starship Command, like, this is what we're doing and, this is how we're doing it and that's it, right? Like company policy, company directive. She was like, well, we're getting it all paid for. They're paying for it all. We can't grumble. We can't complain. We're getting to do his archaeology and that's it, right? And I'm like, yeah, no, but you can stop this bridge, why don't they put the bridge somewhere else, not through the Broxy Kennels Hill Fort, right? And I'm like, well, it's actually quite easy to do if people were switched on and they knew what was happening. You can actually take political control. These people don't want political control. They don't want democratic control, right? Archaeologists don't need democracy. They don't need hey, we've got rights. Democracy. It's not like when you go to a polling station, people vote for who they want to be in charge. They vote for what party. They vote for what the law should be, right? The people, right? These archaeologists, this new breed of archaeologists, right? They're like, hey, company's paying for everything, company policy, we can poke around, they're paying for all of our archaeology, what we got to grumble about, right? Well, the fact is that, it's because the company are deciding what gets built, where it goes, what gets done, and the archaeologists are just going along with it and saying, oh yeah, get along for the free ride, right? It's completely and totally scandalous, right? Let me tell you this. Reading through all the newspaper archives and learning about the right to petition through law, through history study, and through combining the three fields together, right? So councils and local authorities had corporations, right? They were a corporation. And you can also have a charter as well for the local authority, for the local council. And then they get appointed like a mayor and they elect councillors. They have a sheriff, police chief. It's like a town like Edinburgh, a burg, right? Edinburgh, or whether it's, Portsmouth or whatever, Glasgow, right? London has got the mayor of London. So these corporations, it's a formed body that's got its own judicial governance. It's got elected officials, and the word people in modern times think of a corporate. When I was at school, right, in the 80s, when people said corporation, they usually think of a private entity, a private company, a private body, like electricity or gas or water, right? The water board, the water corporation, right? Now, the council is meant to be like a corporation generally, right? I know they've got different words for it now, like you've got a metropolitan council and things like that, but it's the idea of it, right? It's a body, but it's formed to be a democratic body, right? It's got its own citizens, it's got its own people, and they vote and they have laws and so forth within that body, right? But then every single council is under the laws of England, right? Now, this is the main, and then you've got your judge circuits that go around the country that are the King's Justices, and you have those circuits around the country, the King's Judges, and whenever they go to a particular area, they call the jury from the electoral register, they call the jury together. But obviously, if it was petty sessions, you only have the magistrates, like the sheriff courts in Scotland, right? Now, this is the thing. When you form a limited company or a corporation, right, it can be for private business, okay? And when you work for that company, they pay you money, but you don't have any rights or democratic vote through that company other than what the government give you, right? If you've got working rights, if you've got employment law, right, it's set in the law of the country. But then you've got policy within that company, right? But that only applies to people who work for it or maybe people who use the services, right? And that's just usually an agreement. It's not law of the country. Now, this is when we're getting into all these AGM meetings, right? Workers, right, don't hold shares in these corporations and companies. Workers get paid money, not very good money, not very much money, like Luddites or suffragettes, wanted women's work rights and women's voting rights. Luddites wanted more money. They weren't actually against technology, Luddites. It was all about the wages, and they petitioned about it, and they failed, right? And the only reason they got arrested was because it was private property, company businesses. It wasn't like public property. It wasn't like, the machines they smashed up the Luddites, right? It was privately owned property, right? And they classed it as a private act. They didn't class it as a political act in public, like what ended up getting damaged some public property, which was owned by the taxpayer, owned by the public, right? It was all private acts they got arrested for, okay? Private property destruction. Now, this is the thing, right? What I want to say is this. Everyone who is under a council authority, or everyone who is under a council corporation or something, right? They elect their councillors, and their councillors represent them. And even though they're meant to be subscribed to certain political parties, the employment law is meant to be that if you work for this council, you're meant to be selfless, right? I don't know how you can have an employment policy that is selfless if you're actually joint to a party. And even the concept of political party control of a council, how can you have political party of a control of a council if each councillor is selfless? They can't have a tie to a party, surely, if they're selfless, if they're only acting on behalf of their constituents. Now, it's granted that if they got elected by a majority of Labour, then usually those majority of Labour citizens usually have the say in what goes on because they had the largest proportion of votes. But they won't agree on every single thing that the council's going to do. And the main basis of the council, right, if you can understand this, is that it's meant to be like a court. Every single thing that gets put in front of the council is meant to be judged case by case with evidence, and then you can object to it, and then the applicant puts evidence in front of the council, and then the public can object to it, and then it gets looked at, and then the council make a decision, but case by case, like in the courts. That means that they've got to judge it based on the evidence and based on whether the people want it case by case, which means that you can't really have a control of a council by Labour and say, no, the Labour Party want this or that, because you never know what the electors are going to want to do case by case until you hear the case, right? You can't decide what the outcome of a case is going to be until you've heard it. So when you elect Labour, you can't say, right, every single thing all year in this county is going to be approved because the people voted for Labour like a manifesto, because it defies the due process of law. They're not actually, when they go into that polling station, they're not voting, right, to approve every single application that gets put through that year in favour of what the Labour Party want. Because that would be like saying, hey, right, there's going to be 50 or 100 crimes this year, and we'll just go to the polling station and say, hey, we're going to find them all guilty, or we're going to find them not guilty. You can't do that, because it's case by case. So you can't. The theory of Labour control of a council is fictional. It is actually fictional, because you can't have an employment policy which says that you're selfless, right, except to your constituents on a case-by-case basis, right, case by case. So control of the council is purely fictional. It is actually a lie and a deception, right? Now, this is the thing. Councils come to decisions. So the councillors are meant to, every councillor is hypothetically supposed to vote in the council on the majority of their constituents who elected them, right? So if you've got a council area with 3,000 citizens and a council area with, like 2,000 citizens and another council area with 1,500 citizens, right? Each specific case before the council is, in theory, supposed to be voted on by that councillor raising their hand on what their constituents' opinion is on each issue that is before the council separately, right? And when a councillor votes, right, he's meant to be voting on behalf of his people. So everyone who voted Labour are not going to have the same opinion, right? Even if they usually get a majority, they aren't going to have the same opinion on every housing estate application. They aren't going to have the same opinion on every factory that's going to be built. And they aren't going to have the same opinion on every person who gets modifications to a house or pub or building, right? It's case by case. Now, even when the council, who are meant to be approving something or coming to a resolution, right, and then the panel of the council, the cabinet of the council, right, with the head, who's like, meant to be the judicial authority who makes the orders in council, which is like, decisions on behalf of the town and the corporation. When they make that order, right, then the corporation has come to a decision, supposedly through its electorate, through its councillors, and to the cabinet of the council, right? That is a decision, and that corporation has come to a decision. Now, and it makes an order. But there are things also that, when it makes an order, someone might not agree with the order, right? Now, this is where we're getting tricked and deceived, right? Because when the council makes an order, right, you can challenge that on a judicial review. But the judicial review can only criticise process and procedure and legal. So if they didn't follow the law, or didn't interpret the law properly, or didn't apply the law properly, or didn't follow procedure, you can go for a judicial review. It costs a hell of a lot of money, and lawyers charge a lot of money for it. And it's meant to have a jury as well. It's supposed to have a jury, right, for civil matters, if you get a judicial review, because it was part of the civil courts, right? And they've taken the jury away, so the people don't decide on that. But it's only meant to be to criticise the processes. Now, this is the thing, right? Even though the council came to a decision, and also, particularly in Scotland, if you didn't agree with the decision of the council, it could refer it to a committee of 3, right? So there's actually meant to be an appeal process. I know that there is in Scotland, because there's several acts of law in 1837 that had an appeal process to 3 councillors, right? So you could actually appeal a council decision. Currently, in our Metropolitan Council, they're saying that there is no such thing, that it does not exist, that you cannot appeal it. And they're trying to make out that you can't appeal anything that the councillors decided to Parliament, not in any local building or planning matters or anything like that. Even though a 2010 Act of Law, the 2010 Local Petitions Order, said that local building and planning matters will not be regarded as local matters for petitioning purposes. So that means that even if you petitioned Parliament about it, it wasn't even regarded as a local matter, right? So you could do it, but yet why is Jamie Stone, right, and the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Parliament and HM government, why are they rejecting petitions about planning matters and local planning matters, right? Now, this is the thing. Now, let's take, for example, a water board corporation that's incorporated and an electricity board that's incorporated. They are a company and they've got powers and they can do certain things. They've got staff, right? They might even have shareholders in an AGM meeting, but their workers who work in the factory floor level do not vote, right? They do what they're told and they get paid money, not a lot of money, right? But the corporation itself and its board of directors can make decisions. And they might have a board of directors who come to a resolution that we're going to petition Parliament, right? Maybe for a new private act or a private bill or a private act of law, right, for us to give ourselves more powers, right? They might want more powers over their workers. They might want the laws of the country changing so they can do certain things, right? Now, you can have a local council authority. The Water Corporation Board or the Electricity Corporation Board can apply to the council for permission to do something, right? It might want to install new gas meters, or it might want to install electricity boxes, right? But because the electricity corporation is only interested in the electricity, right, of that area, right? The council is the governing body of that area when it comes to all of the streets that are owned by the citizens, all of the areas and places, right? Now, if the water board applies to the local council and it disagrees with and it says, no, you can't have permission to do that, then the water board can't do it. The council have come to a decision, right? Just like they might have decided to build houses or not build houses. Can we fit these new water electricity meters or can't we, right? Now, this is the thing. The water board or corporation or electricity board or corporation might not agree with the council when it's coming to a decision. Just like we might not agree with the council, right, when it's going to build a load of houses. Now, they're saying that there's nothing you can do about it, that you can't appeal it, this is the deception right there. You can. And this is where the other corporations who aren't local authorities or whatever authorities, right, they oppose councils. They oppose councils. But not like, when they, once they apply to ask permission to do something and it's refused, they actually go to the government and they say, this council is obstructing us from doing this. It denied us permission to fit these water meters. Therefore, we want a private bill put through to give us power to install those meters anyway, regardless of if the council want us to or not, right? Or we want an instrument put through to nullify that decision of the council or override it. So you can actually do that. And that's what we're being deceived and misled about. Now, private bills and private laws can be opposed. So if the water board want to give themselves more power, right, the local council can oppose the water corporation, right? The local council corporation can go to Parliament and oppose the water corporation, right? And they can both be for or against the private bill. But this is the thing. Public petitions to Parliament, right, were separated at one point, the process from submitting private bills. But they're still to the same authority over the same matters, and public petitions don't necessarily have to have drafted a private bill. Or it could be public law. It still is at the same level to the same authority and covering the same spectrum of matters. It's only that it is called a public petition, and it asks for a general solution or asks for the government to come up with a solution, because you're not drafting a private bill and saying, it's like writing a song, right? If you've already written a song, and if you've written the words for it, and if you've written the music for it, and you say, I want to get this song published like we've written it, that's like a private bill, right? But you don't have to do that. A normal public petition can say, right, we want the government to write us the song and we want it to be like this generally, or do this or that, right? And as long as it does what they ask, we're not too specifically bothered exactly what the song words are or what the tune is, but as long as it does this or that, or, is about this or that, like make people happy or whatever, make us a happy song, right? They don't always have to have the song written out and drafted with the music, and that's the thing, right? So public petitions... Now, the public, the community, the commonality, although they vote and tell their councillors what to do, and although they are meant to direct the council, and the council's supposed to make decisions on what the people want, right? It's not always doing that because of this dark side of political parties, which are controlling decisions, and the pressures from these companies who are doing these massive financial projects, and the incentives. Hey, look, if we pay for this, if we approve this project, we'll get a nice little bit of archaeology out of it for free. It'll be doing our bit for archaeology and so forth, right? But that might not be what the people want. They might not want, entire natural area destroyed just because a company turns up and it's got X amount of money and slap X amount of money down and saying, hey, we're going to redevelop this area because we can afford to, right? Local democracy is supposed to run on what the voters want, not run on how much money a corporate company can come along and put a project and a design on the table and the architects and so forth and say, hey, we want this because we can afford it, right? But they're actually buying it with money when the local area and council is going to come to decisions based on the democratic will, on what the people want or don't want, right? And this is the thing, like, with Broxley Kennels, which I'm like, hey, if we get a certain small amount of signatures here, we could actually not have it go through that hill fort, we could have it go somewhere else. And I actually got obstructed by strange, mysterious intervention on that, right? And this is the other thing. So the people, if the council does something which the people actually didn't agree with or didn't want, then that when they write a petition out, they're forming a body, right, which can oppose the council's decision. This council and authority have come to a decision, right? Well, a certain number of people can say, right, well, we want to oppose that corporation in government, just like you can oppose a water corporation who are putting, like these 5G things that are going up everywhere, right? And this is where we're at with it. So the community actually go to Parliament with a petition and say, this council has made an order or come to a decision that it's going to do this or this or that. We don't want them to do it, right? But you can do that because you can do it through a legislative solution, which is the same as water board or corporations saying that we are a corporation. The council corporation made a decision that we're not allowed to do this in this area, and we want to oppose them, right? We want more powers given. So it's actually it's going to the government to ask for powers to either intervening, override or re-legislate over the decision that the council has come to, right? Now, we're not being allowed to do that because e-petitions currently are saying, oh, you're not allowed to petition over local building matters. You're not allowed to petition over local building and planning or land, which is a lie. It's a complete and total lie. You can. You can do an e-petition. It doesn't have to be a private bill. And most people don't write up their own acts of law, and they can't afford a lawyer or a parliamentary agent to do it, or get big money sponsors, right? And you don't actually need big money sponsors. You just need public signatures, right? So people used to do that. People actually, community groups used to oppose their local authority or oppose other corporations in private bills. But it doesn't have to be what you call a private bill or the private bill process. It is just public petitions. Because you're saying, we've got a problem, you're presenting a problem, and you're asking for a solution for the government. And which solution the government use isn't important. That's up to the government. And they're meant to use initiative. They're not meant to say, oh, we don't know what you're asking, right? Which is what they do now. Oh, we don't know what you're asking. We don't know how to do it. They're meant to find a way to do it. Oh, shall we use an instrument? Shall we write a bill? Shall we get the speaker to put an order through? Right? They've actually got those things at their disposal. We're actually being lied through their teeth, because political parties, the main parties, who don't want the voters to oppose these decisions that their parties have come to, Labour and Tory, leading councils, or they've made a decision and that decision's final, they want you to go along with it, because otherwise, if they allow us to run these petitions on the main Parliament website, right, these bills, get bills or instruments, then they don't have control of the council. We are taking control away from the council, right? Just like the Water Board might want to take powers away from the council in its ability to pass and plan where water apparatus are installed and who can install them. The water company might want the power to decide where they're installed and what they can install, not the council, right? And this is very important in building and planning, because a lot of people don't want these houses built. A lot of people don't want them built in their area or next to where they live. And a lot of people don't want these huge factories built. And if a council comes to a decision when it wasn't really the decision what the people wanted, right, we're being obstructed from forming a body and going to the government, right, for a resolution to oppose that council body, that council corporation, whatever you want to call it in modern terms, or metropolitan council, or whichever it is, right? We can oppose that council's, the body of it, right? And get people to support it from anywhere in the country. And no, you don't have to live in the local area, because you don't have to live in the local area to buy land in the area or submit planning in the local area. So why would you have to live in the local area to oppose someone buying land in the area? You don't. So they're filling us in with absolute tosh. It's to do with interest. Now, if you can get an interest, if you can go to Parliament and put a petition and say, hey, England, they're building these houses here in our county. We don't want them there. We don't like it. We need to oppose this council. Will you back us up? And, if you can get people interested around England, then you get the signatures to do it. Unfortunately, the public aren't experienced and knowledgeable about submitting private bills. Only big companies do it. They get very expensive lawyers, like Alex Dillistone, who's a parliamentary agent, right? And it's all a big company interest. Local councils do it. Local councils use our money. They pay archaeologists. They pay parliamentary agents. They've got the legal services unit of the council, right, on our money to draw them up plans to go to Parliament to get private bills put through for that council using our money. Our money? Is that the Labour Party's money? Is that the Labour Party's money? Is it? Is it the Conservative Party's money? No, it's not. But they're actually behaving like it's their money. No, it's the people who's voting money, right? So, what is the public going to do when we're actually meant to be paying the wages of the councillors, paying the wages of the council, paying the wages of the legal services, paying for parliamentary agents who might not be doing what we want? And particularly working with companies who have got millions, employing, archaeologists who come straight out of university, who've just happened to just have money thrown at them. They can throw these plans on the table, and the council are passing on new university, new swimming baths, new this, new that, right? It is the power of money actually overwhelming and overpowering the voters, the people, which is completely and totally wrong, scandalous, and criminal, right? Now, the problem is that normal people, like I said, don't write up private bills, right? They're not experienced with it, but they can do it to Parliament. But you don't need to, because public petitions is meant to be the simple process. It's meant to be the simplified request, right? And the community, the commonality can do it, because it's the people can disagree with the council and form a body as much as the water board can oppose and disagree with the council, right? And they're rejecting us. They're actually, it's actually illegal. It's illegally doing it. I know for a fact that on that Parliament website, right, there are multiple groups of local people. There are groups of local people on the Parliament website who are continuing to... there are people on the Parliament website on record, on the archives of the early e-petition site, and they're petitioning about local matters. They're petitioning about local building and planning. I can't get access to them. I need to apply for those archives, but you can see the names of the groups who are doing it, and you can work out from the names of those groups that they're all local bodies. They're petitioning as a local body, as a local group, and they're currently trying to stop people from doing that at the moment. And that was when it was under that 2010 local petitions order, because it said that you could do it. So I know they were doing it. Now, I think that what I think is, since around 2010, what's happened is, when the Nick Clegg, David Cameron government got in, they said, they took a look at it and they thought, oh, just a minute, the people are overriding all our local councils. We need to try and stop them from doing this, because otherwise we don't have control of them, right? And they've put this policy in e-petitions, right, which says, oh, we're not taking on any local issues, right, which is completely criminal and scandalous. You can't have a policy on that. And there aren't even any powers in standing orders of Parliament to give them powers to create that policy. In fact, it's not even a government department, is e-petitions. It's a judicial function of the House of Commons, so you can't have a policy for it. The standing orders are the rules. That's what the rules are. So I don't know where the hell this policy's come from, right? They can't have it. So we're just being obstructed. Now, the problem is that, firstly, right, a lot of these groups, community groups of people, like, Save Manchester Greenbelt, or there's one Smithy Bridge community group. There is some in Durham that I've seen. They're all over the country, but they find it hard to get interest because they don't seem to be growing. I don't know whether it's something to do with Facebook algorithms or what, but they tend to have trouble growing bigger, the groups. And they're being blocked illegally, right? And they're being forced to do these judicial reviews, which lawyers make scandalous amounts of money out of, right? Rather than paying a lawyer for a judicial review, they should be paying a lawyer to do a private bill through for them to nullify the council's order or give another legislative solution instead. They shouldn't be spending the money on those judicial reviews, because it only challenges the technical, legal basis and principle on it, right? So we've got a situation where the public can't help themselves, And you've got these community groups who might be trying to protect land or their own immediate area around them, and there's nothing they seem to be able to do to stop these juggernaut beasts who are just throwing money at it. But this is the thing, this is where the complaint comes in here, because these archaeologists are welcoming that money. In fact, that money is getting used to pay the archaeologists, and the archaeologists are getting a little bit of archaeology out of it for their benefit and money, and a lot of it's been paid for, and the companies are actually helping them out. But they're actually still building things that not necessarily the people want built there, right? So this is the thing. It's an example of the power of money, which has replaced the power of electors. And the governments have put a big obstruction in there, right? Because Scottish Parliament, they've got their new little AI petitions form, which basically blunts your request, you know. They don't like you submitting strong evidence against things, and they're saying, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. You can ask for this, you can't ask for that. No, you can. You can ask for this or that, right? Why don't we ban all private bills that concern public land or private land or local issues, right? Then they'd soon be complaining. Then, if Parliament started saying, "No, we don't accept private bills over land. We don't accept private bills over development. We don't accept private bills over anything to do with building or planning," you know, then they'd soon start complaining. The public e-petitions is meant to be the equivalent of people who don't know how to draft or write their own bill, but just ask for the solution or resolution generally, right? Okay? But it can be for the same things, because Parliament can decide to make a bill, or decide to make a public bill, or decide to make an instrument, or decide to make an order as the appropriate resolution. How can we resolve this? And actually, it says that in an important paragraph that I read recently was that from, I think it was the 1832 Petitions Committee report, it said that Parliament, actually, it could have actually been from that Gwilym Dodd book on petitions that I just bought. It said that Parliament was historically meant to resolve every grievance. Parliament was supposed to be able to find a resolution for every complaint, for every grievance. And actually, they're all being blocked and obstructed now. You know, and I won't go to the Ombudsman. The thing with the Ombudsman is this, right? I think it was set up in 1967, and MP's got to sign it. What even is the Ombudsman if an MP has to sign it? Don't you think that's strange that the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman, even though he doesn't govern MPs, she doesn't govern MPs, they govern all the rest of the government departments, right? It's exactly like saying, hey, I've got a personal grievance over a government department, I want it looked into. My MP's got to sign it, put his signature to it, which is what they do when you submit a public petition. Your MP's meant to have to sign it, right? So that's actually what the Ombudsman is. The Ombudsman was actually meant to pick up all of the grievances over the public departments rather than it going to Parliament, right? And actually MPs are meant to be responsible and answerable to the petition, but they're not accepting any complaints to remove MPs. They're saying that you can't do it when you can. In fact, the recall of MPs for criminal offences was meant to enhance and increase democratic liability to the public, not remove it. But what they did is, when they introduced recall petitions, they've actually slipped out from under the rug the ability for us to petition directly to remove them just because we want to remove them, right? When actually you can, but only by they've claimed that they're removing that through their policy, but the policy is a load of, it can't exist, that policy. It is utter fictional, right? So what MPs are now, the model that they're trying to pass over now as like legitimate is that MPs can only be removed if they're a criminal and only accused of a criminal in a court. But they're meant to have privilege to protect them through until the end of the session, which isn't even been acknowledged either. What they're actually doing is they're sneaking and sneakily removing all democratic accountability. Right? So they're only accountable, supposedly, to the police, which is one thing they were meant to be protected against, right? And it's a way for them to be controlled, really, by this police regime. So it's just tosh, So when it comes to, how does this tie into archaeology and development on land? The fact is that there should not be half as many developments as there is, because people should be successfully defeating them. And if they don't win through the council doesn't do what the people really want, there is a legal right to seek help, assistance from the nation. It doesn't have to be the local area. And the local, oh no, there's got to be an interest. Yeah, well, there's an interest when I generate an interest. This is the thing. What interest has a company got in a plot of land in Skegness? How did they find out about it? What interest have they got? Oh, it's for sale, Google Maps. But you're not from the area. Why would you want to buy it and then go into the council and bring a case to build? And then the council said, oh, well, you can't oppose it unless you're from the area. The guy bought it and he's not from the area. He's bringing a case to the council. How can you not oppose it if you're not from the area, but you can buy it if you're not from the area, right? This is the thing. It's just, what it is absolute, complete corporate Armageddon. The businesses are actually trying to eliminate democracy. Democracy is being attempted to be eliminated. Now, I can't see, right, how the archaeologists would side with the voters, because they don't have an incentive to stand up for our rights and our democratic powers. There's no incentive, because if the lecturers and if the archaeologists and if the historians, like there's Professor Karen Bowie, who's at Glasgow University. She's a historian who does petitioning, right? Why would Professor Karen Bowie at Glasgow University, right, and these archaeologists help the public to get their democratic rights back into effect properly and stop these companies from building when the government has given a nice cushy deal to the archaeologists if they go along with this new model they've put in here, Bob the Builder. Bob the Builder's helping out archaeologists, he's giving them all jobs to do and helping them do more archaeology, but it's actually as long as you help them build houses. But the public aren't wanting them to bang houses up everywhere. This is the thing. So they're being bought with money. It's like, hey, you can get all these, amazing archaeology projects and get to do all this research if you go along with our building plans and help us, do more building and development, which is completely, utterly scandalous. It's so despicable and scandalous that it's just, it is not democratic. So this is the new age university graduates mindset. It's like the Starship Enterprise. They're on board. We're all on board with it. This is what we're doing, right? It's Starship Command, right? Starship Command is not democratically accountable to the public. And it isn't even accountable to the workers, right? To the engine crew, to the staff. Starship Enterprise is only accountable to the AGM shareholders and nothing else, right? And if archaeologists want to become some co-operating puppets of AGM shareholders, right, who, completely and totally buy councils, right, then it's just despicable, and the architects as well. The architects are as bad because, you've got all these architects coming out of university. Hey, look, the council have just given me £1 million I get to design this new wacky sports centre. But we didn't want a new sports centre, right? They don't have a new sports centre in, Shrewsbury aren't writing off the town centre to rebuild a new sports centre, or Winchcombe in Oxfordshire, or, Bicester or wherever, or in Bybury Village, they've got all the tourists going there, they're filming Stardust movies there, it's classic vintage, it's the middle of Bath, right? It's government councils do this who don't like their own town. They don't like their town, they don't like their place, and they don't like their people, and they don't like their history. So they have to rebuild it and completely, totally blitz it. It's not democratic. Archaeologists are not democratic at all. So when it comes to Stonehenge, save Stonehenge, they threw 125 million or whatever it was at, Lee Day solicitors, and they lost. Oh, we've got 8 bundles here. 8 bundles of legal documents with about 8 barristers. Who in England, right, can send in 8 barristers into the Royal Courts of Justice? 8 barristers. Got 8 barristers going in, right, and they didn't win. And they're meant to have the Stonehenge archaeology group is meant to have the cutting edge, the absolute pinnacle, right? The most prestigious, highest quality legal representation and access to archaeological facts and evidence that anyone could possibly dream of having, right, in a court. You couldn't get together more experts and archaeologists, information and professional witness statements as in that legal case for Stonehenge. But they lost, right? Oh, and all that money actually went to a private solicitor. And it was a miracle that the government decided that they weren't going to do the tunnel for now, right? But this is the thing. The actual democratic process, that £125,000 that went to Lee Day solicitors for Stonehenge, right? They could have paid a parliamentary agent to draft up a new bill or instrument, right, and get it sponsored, because you get them sponsored, to get put through Parliament to extend the protection around that Stonehenge in the land. Easy. And I bet the parliamentary agent probably would have cost a lot less than £125,000 because, local council legal services can't be spending that much money on it because they're doing loads of them. They're doing private bills for everything under the sun, whether it's for BT, whether it's for water, electricity powers. I know I've said those over and over repeatedly, but they're the main ones that you think of, right? There are lots of them, right? They're getting new bills put through every day of the week. So where's all the money coming from? Well, it's our money. It's our money, right? Particularly when they're opposing those companies. Sometimes they're actually working together with those companies. And sometimes the people don't want these 5G towers and things, right? So we're being side attacked. It's like the best example of it is literally like in Star Trek: The Next Generation, right? We've got the Klingons now have decloaked so we can see them, right? Oh, damn, we're getting taken over by these big corporate entities, Vanguard, etc. They've decloaked, but they've already managed to get us all on their devices and machines, get access to our files, getting digital ID, put in all the facial recognition. They're already halfway through the manoeuvre. They've already drilled a hole in the side of the ship, right? And they're already coming on board. And then, we're not being taken over. We've got to welcome these aliens in now because they're going to help us, right? But there's a big hole in the side of the ship, right? What's the hole in the side of the ship for then, right? Why is the field being obliterated by this big corporate company? Why have they put an aeroplane engine factory there, which looks horrendous? Why are you driving down the M5, right, in the Cotswolds, and there's a horrendous building there, which was beautiful countryside, with a horrendous sort of green paint effort to make it look like the countryside, the side of the M5, right? This horrendous building. It's no, it's horrendous, right? what they're actually doing to us is horrendous wreckage, right? It's not corporate art. It is a wreck. And this is the thing. And the government, oh, we're not being, it's like, literally, it's scandalous. So, it's all about the Starship Enterprise. As far as I'm concerned, these archaeologists are all saluting, It's like, as long as it, furthers, as long as they get their name in the history books and as long as they get the award for it, they're happy, right? But this is the thing about archaeology. Notice that archaeologists always like to get their awards and honours from other people's past awards and honours. It's like, oh, look, I've dug up a talk. It's mine now. Now, it's like, oh, someone else's awards and honours. They make their fame, right, out of other people's past achievements. It's like, oh, look, someone has made some stone axes. Oh, I'm going to claim those now. Oh, look, I found the stone axes, Oh, didn't you do well? No, actually, someone made those, but now I've just made myself famous out of finding them. It's like they prey on historically, like our ancestors' achievements, and they use it for their own honour and achievements, right? And then take the credit for it. And that's why I am not supporting archaeologists, because it's not. I don't think it's good for the country. Archaeology should be done. The public could pay for the archaeology. The public, if there's something worth preserving or investigating, the public can pay for it. It doesn't need to be corporate sponsors buying them out in order to try and get them on their side and go along with these development regimes.